What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the show. So I want to show you this clip from the debate yesterday. There was a debate between Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley. They were talking about Social Security. I always like to take a look at what they're saying when it comes to reforming Social Security, because you'll have politicians saying different things, and I want to know that they could potentially be president. There's still a possibility. Of course, we know that former President Trump is the front runner when it comes to Republicans, but the race is starting to tighten, and Nikki Haley she's very close to former President Trump in the New Hampshire race. So the Iowa caucus, we already know that former President Trump is probably going to win that. However, when you move to New Hampshire, that's when things change up a little bit, and we're looking at a pretty close race. And now that Chris Christie has stepped out of the race, those votes are going somewhere. They could be going to Nikki Haley. We don't think those votes will be going to former President Trump because Chris Christie was very, very tough on former President Trump and said a lot of things that I don't think those people would support both Chris Christie and former President Trump. So those votes are going to go somewhere, Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley. I'm thinking they're probably going to go to Nikki Haley. But nonetheless, I want you guys to listen to what they say about Social Security reform. So that's what we're going to focus on in this video. But first off, if you guys can do me a favor, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that little bell notification, and then click all. By clicking all, you'll get notified anytime we post a video. We do daily videos here, so by clicking the bell notification and clicking all, you should be getting updated every day. And just a reminder, thank you for your support. I really appreciate it. And if you'd like to follow me on Twitter and Threads, you can at the TEC Show Live. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'll start the clip. I'm going to do more of a reaction to this, so I will be on the side of the screen and we'll talk a little bit. Just because this is so long, I don't want to keep going back and forth, and so it's easier for me to do it this way, and it's a lot quicker. Here we go.
Let's move on to Social Security. Let's move on to Social Security. According to the Social Security Administration, Social Security will be unable to pay full benefits in a decade if no action is taken. Governor DeSantis, you have said that you're not going to, quote, mess with Social Security, unquote. Does that mean you have committed to never raising the retirement age and never cutting benefits?
Okay, the important, before he even answers, never cutting Social Security benefits and never raising the age, okay? It's very important, never. And so that's the question there. So let's hear what he has to say.
So all seniors out there, promise has been made to you. You've paid into this. Every single paycheck that you've had your entire life, they've taken money out of, and that promise needs to be fulfilled. So that will happen when I'm president. Of course, I have a lot of seniors in Florida that depend on Social Security. I know many of them, and I think back to my own grandmother who lived till 91. Social Security was her sole source of income. So promise made, promise kept. You know, on the retirement age, it used to be people would say, well, life expectancy is going up. Shouldn't it mirror that? Well, the problem now in the last 5 years is life expectancy is going down. So I don't see how you can raise the retirement age when our life expectancy is collapsing in this country. That's a huge problem in and of itself. I'll work with both sides of the aisle. We'll work on something for the long-term strengthening, but I am not going to mess with seniors' benefits. In this high inflation environment, groceries are going through the roof, rent is going through the roof, all these staples, and you get a cost of living adjustment, but that's not enough to cover the costs that have been increased. So seniors are really strapped, particularly those that are on fixed income, and they have to know that we're going to deliver when it comes to their Social Security check. Now, we're going to get inflation down. We're going to get energy costs down. There's going to be a lot of things that are going to help seniors, but I think seniors should know promise made will be a promise kept.
So just a point of clarification, 15 seconds. Removing current seniors from the equation, you're not saying that you're committing to never raising the retirement age or cutting benefits.
I would never raise the retirement age in the face of declining life expectancy. I mean, I think that would be really bad. I mean, just think about it. That hurts blue-collar folks. You get taxed your entire life. Life expectancy's down. You may not even be recouping very many benefits. And so life expectancy is declining.
Thank you, Governor.
That's a big
Governor
problem.
Haley?
Okay, so before she says anything, so he committed to not cutting Social Security. So that is good. However, moving the full retirement age up, you saw when he was pressed on that, he said that he would not raise the full retirement age if if we're seeing when it comes to the overall average of life expectancy, if it's going down, he is not going to raise the full retirement age. That is what he said. He didn't say that if the life expectancy starts to increase, would you increase the full retirement age? So he never answered that question. He stayed away from that. So you have to listen to what they're not saying. And so it is a potential if the life expectancy goes back, and I think it has started to change. We had that drop, and that drop was mainly because of the pandemic, but now it's starting to rise again. So in that situation, would you raise the full retirement age? Okay, now we're going to listen to Nikki Haley. She's going to be talking about how she feels about Social Security reform, what she thinks needs to happen. Okay. One more thing too, before we get to this, and I'll talk a little bit about this at the end of the video, but what is the solution? How are you going to fix Social Security? So Ron DeSantis didn't talk about anything when it comes to fixing the program. He just said he's not going to cut the program. Okay, well, that's great. What are you going to do moving forward? Because something needs to be done. You're going to have to, and you guys know how I feel about this, so we'll talk about that at the very end, but he didn't give a solution. He just said what he's not going to do. Okay, let's go ahead. Here we go.
3 years in a row, he voted to raise life expectancy to 70 years old. 3 years in a row. Go to DeSantisLies.com and you'll see it.
Okay, so and this is pretty funny too, because if you guys didn't know, Ron DeSantis was a representative, and when he was a representative, he did vote to raise the full retirement age. So now he's changed his tune because he's running for president, or I won't say because he's running for president, but now that he is running for president, he has changed his thoughts about Social Security, which is okay. I don't have a problem with that, but which one, back when you were voting for it, what was the reason why you were voting to raise the full retirement age? And maybe he'll say, I guess, like I said, he can go back to, well, the life expectancy at that time was on the rise, and that's why I voted to raise the full retirement age. He could say that, and that's probably what he would say. But it's interesting to note that when it comes to Social Security, back then, he was okay with raising the full retirement age, which is a cut to Social Security. Okay, here we go.
So now suddenly he's going to tell you because he's running for president, he's not going to do it. You can't trust him. What I'll tell you is Social Security is going to go bankrupt in 10 years. Medicare is going to go bankrupt in 8. He talks about taking care of seniors. Right now, Florida is the inflation hotspot. It's the highest cost of living of any state in the country. Seniors are having to leave because they can't afford it. It's documented in DeSantisLies.com. What I'll tell you we have to do is we have to keep our promises to seniors, but we also can't put our head in the sand. For those like Ron saying they're not going to touch Social Security, that means they're going to leave after 4 or 8 years and leave it bankrupt? No. What we do is we go to those in their 20s and say we're going to change the retirement age to reflect life expectancy. Instead of cost of living increases, we do increases based on inflation. We limit benefits on the wealthy.
Thank you, Governor.
And we expand Medicare Advantage plans, which seniors love.
Thank you,
That's
Governor.
how we'll deal with making sure they have it.
Reducing the benefits, when you do the change in calculation, reducing the benefits. So let's just put this in perspective. Under her administration, you would have seniors getting less cost of living adjustments while your tax dollars are going to pay the pensions of Ukrainian bureaucrats.
That's not true.
You talk about putting
That's such a
Americans
lie,
last.
Ron.
That is wrong. You've supported all that money going over there. So let's put
You're
our
so
own people
desperate.
first. We
You're
have to
just
put
so
our people
desperate.
Governor
first.
Haley, let him
and
speak.
she also said, recently that the age of Social Security is way too low. And I criticized that, and then she was called on it, and then she said she never said it, of course, you're lying. And then sure enough, you put on the interview where she's there, spit an image, and she says it's way too low. So, we can play this song and dance. She has a record, she makes statements, and I think part of the problem with her candidacy is now that she's getting scrutiny, she's got this problem with ballistic podiatry, shooting herself in the foot every other day, saying things that now she doesn't even take questions from people.
Thank you, Governor DeSantis. Governor Haley, you want to raise the retirement age for younger Americans, but you have not said what that age should be. Should voters in their 20s plan on working until they're 70?
First of all, he hasn't answered the fact that he voted to raise the retirement age to 73 different times.
I really don't like when you ask a politician a question, a direct question, and then they answer that question with a question of what the other person in the debate didn't say. I really do. I dislike that. Answer the question, and then if you want to go on and ask another question of your opponent, then go ahead and do that. But I hate when they do that.
He can call me whatever name and be demeaning as much as he wants. It doesn't change the fact that Ron's lying because Ron's losing. Everybody in the country sees it for what it is. So what I'll tell you is, yes, we're going to be responsible with it, and we're going to go to those in our 20s. When I said the retirement age was too low, again, where he's lying, it's because if you go, and you can go to DeSantisLies.com, I said it's too low if we're going to look at those in their 20s. We have to go and start looking at what we can do to get out of this. We want to make sure that everybody who was promised gets it, but we also want to make sure our kids have something when they get it too. So the way we do that is...
Okay, so I'm going to show you guys the second portion of this. I had it in two different clips.
Exactly how I laid it out. Then we'll know what we're looking at, and then we can start focusing. The other thing is we need to start cutting spending in D.C. We have to go back to pre-COVID levels. That's why I'll veto any spending bill that doesn't take us back to pre-COVID levels. That will save us trillions. We've got to go into every agency, replace the head of every agency, and send people into every agency. I did that as governor. Pull down old regs, pull down old programs, get rid of any problem children, and clean those agencies out and get them mission focused. There is a lot of waste in D.C. You need an accountant to go in there and clean it up, but we're not going to take away from anyone else. And he's yet to answer the fact that he voted 3 times to raise the retirement age.
Just a clarification, Governor Haley. In 15 seconds, should voters in their 20s plan on having to work until they're 70?
They should plan on their retirement age being increased, yes. We're going to change it to reflect more of what life expectancy should be.
Well, one of the things that I think we disagree on, too, is Governor Haley has said Social Security is an entitlement. But, you know, it's not an entitlement. You're paying into it. It's not a welfare program. You're being taxed for this your whole life. And so to expect to have benefits on the back end, you know, I don't think that that's too much. The other thing I'd point out is Social Security for decades ran massive surpluses. What happened to those surpluses? The Congress spent the surpluses.
Yes, when you
they
raise
have a
the
big
debt.
problem with that. So number one.
Okay, so I don't like where he's going here because he's saying that the surpluses, Congress spent the surpluses. That's just not true. That's why we have the trust fund. That's why there's $2.7 trillion sitting in the trust fund right now. That's because of the surplus. So I don't like how he's saying that he's trying to play it into, oh, Congress was taking the money and spending the money. And I've talked about this before. I can find no evidence of that. I've actually done a lot of research on this. I can find no evidence of Congress taking money out of the Social Security Administration or from the trust, out of the trust fund, and spending it. So that's just not true. And that's the reason why we have a trust fund right now. That's the reason why we're not seeing a cut of 23%, you know, that they're saying that it's 10 years down the road. That's the reason why it's 10 years down the road, because you have money to pull from right now. So I just don't like where he's going with that, because then that gets people all, amped up about, oh, Congress is taking the money, and that's why Social Security is in the situation that it's in. That money cannot be touched by Congress. They specifically designed it that way because they knew that if Congress did have access to that money, they would take the money. So that's why we have a trust fund. I don't like this talk here, because then you might start seeing a situation where they say, you know what, let's just take all that Social Security money, the trust fund, we'll just put it in the general fund, and then we'll make sure we take care of Social Security. That is not what we want, because if they get access to that money, then that money will be gone. So I don't like where he's going with that. I think the other stuff that he was talking about was good, but when he started going into that, now you're setting up, the way I look at it is it's just not correct information. And he knows that it's not correct information. That's why we have this trust fund that's set aside right now.
We need term limits for members of Congress. Number 2, we need a balanced budget amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Number 3, we need to give the president a line item veto. And number 4, when you see all these congressmen making a killing in the stock market, like Nancy Pelosi, she could run a very lucrative hedge fund. We need a 28th Amendment to the Constitution that says very simply, Congress shall make no law respecting the citizens of the United States that does not also apply to members of Congress themselves.
Okay, so who do you think won in that debate when it comes to Social Security? I think Ron DeSantis actually said the right things, but he didn't have a solution. Nikki Haley brought up a solution, or a somewhat of a solution. She didn't even give a complete solution, because raising the full retirement age for people who are younger, that is not going to be enough. She said a few other things in there, but her main focus was that raising the age. And I think the question was geared towards that, raising the age there. She talked a little bit about how to reform Medicare. But when it comes down to it, it's not enough money. What they need to do, and I've said this over and over, and I'm going to continue saying this, because it's just not, these politicians are trying to avoid this, but this is what has to happen. You need to either raise the payroll tax across the board, or I should say the payroll contribution across the board. So we're talking about the FICA contribution. You need to raise that, or you need to raise the payroll tax or the payroll contribution for people who are making, if we're saying 400,000 or more, people making 400,000 or more need to start paying into the payroll contribution again. That's what needs to happen, because right now, people making, 168,600, they no longer have to pay into the payroll contribution. So make everyone who is working, everyone who's pulling in a salary, no matter how much you're pulling in, you're going to have to pay into that payroll tax, or you can do it 400,000 or more. So you can have kind of the, I don't want to call it a sweet spot, but from 168,600 to 400,000, you still don't have to pay into the payroll contribution. But once you get over that amount, now you have to pay into the payroll contribution again. That's what needs to happen. These politicians will just kind of tiptoe around this and say, oh, we can raise the full retirement age, and we can do this, and we can, look at COLA, and I don't know what she's talking about. Every time, I wish you would have one of these interviewers press her on the situation where she's talking about the COLA is tied to inflation, because right now COLA is tied to inflation. So the cost of living adjustment is tied to inflation. When inflation goes up, then you should be getting a larger percentage when it comes to COLA. And so I don't know why she keeps saying that's what she wants to do. That's what they're doing right now. What they really need to do, and Ron DeSantis actually mentioned this, the fact that the cost of living adjustment right now is not enough. So you need to have an increase. There needs to be extra money coming in so that cost of living adjustment matches inflation or is a little bit higher than inflation. That would be better, because then your purchasing power goes further. So the Social Security 2100 Act, 2% increase across the board when it comes to the cost of living adjustment. So whatever the cost of living adjustment is, you get 2% more than that. So right now, people receiving that 3.2%, that's the cost of living adjustment for 2024, you would get an additional 2% over that, and it would now be 5.2%. That's what the Social Security 2100 Act would do. That's Representative Larson's bill. He was actually speaking on the floor a couple of days ago, so I'm going to show you some of the stuff that he was saying on the floor, as well as some of the supporters of Social Security 2100 Act. So when it comes down to it, both of these politicians they're talking. Ron DeSantis is at least saying he doesn't want to cut Social Security, which is good. And he's also saying that as long as the life expectancy is on the downtrend, then he is not going to vote for raising the full retirement or support raising the full retirement age. I shouldn't say vote, because presidents don't vote. Okay, so he's not going to support raising the full retirement age. But when it comes to Nikki Haley, she was saying she's in support of raising the full retirement age on people who are, she just said, in their 20s. Wouldn't give us is it going to be 70? Is it going to be older than 70? That could be something too. That might be a reason why she doesn't even want to answer that question, because it could be over 70. We're talking about people who are now in their 20s and that are working. She could say, okay, you're not going to be able to retire until you're 72 or even higher. And so just imagine how bad that would be for people who are working physical labor, physical jobs, where they probably won't be able to work until they're 70. Their body will not allow them to work that long. So those people are going to have to work until they're 70 or 72 or whatever number that she's coming up with. And that will only be, I think it only comes to about maybe 16 to 20% of the reform that Social Security needs. You still need to pull in revenue. And if you don't pull in the revenue, Social Security is not going to be reformed. The trust fund will be depleted. It might take a little bit longer for the trust fund to be depleted. So instead of they're saying 10 years now, it might take 15, maybe even 20 years, but it will still get depleted. And if it gets depleted, then you're going to be looking at a cut of about 23%. And so that's all I have for this video. But who do you think won when it comes to Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley? Who do you think did a better job answering the question of Social Security reform? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe for more, and I'll talk to you in the next one.